Okay, very good afternoon to all. I'm Associate Professor Chua Biling. Thank you so much for the organizer for inviting me to this seminar. In fact, I'm looking forward to having a lot of rich discussions with experts in Japan on this very important topic of looking into infrastructure and design to develop holistically our learner for the next generation. So Professor Tan has given you the more macro picture of some of the educational shifts, in Singapore, and also what are some of the important competencies that we need to develop in our younger generation. Now, before I share on how do we go about looking into designing the teaching and learning for 21st century competencies and holistic development of learner, I would like to revisit the reason to it, and it will hinge upon what Professor Tan has shared. So Professor Tan actually mentioned that really it's important right now to think about what are some of the competencies that we need to be developing in our learners. So he mentioned things like generative thinking, mentioned things like ethical thinking, and in this AI world right now, it's important that we have the A, B, C, D, E. When we think about how we facilitate learners' engagement and learning. But in order to do this, then we need to make provision for collaborative learning, provision for multiple perspective, provision for them being able to be challenged by authentic problems, have an inquiry-based approach to learning. And with this, I'm going to go to what is the aim of the Singapore education system? What is it that we hope to develop in our learner? And it's the impetus on why is it the environment, the learning environment for students have to be rethought, reimagined to develop, these learners that we want, and to have a focus on the learning process that's important, for our students. So if you look into this Swiss road, this framework, we aim to develop our learners in Singapore to be confident person, self-directed learner, active contributor, and also a concerned citizen. But what is important is we aim to nurture the values, the disposition, for them to be able to do that. And we also develop their social emotional competencies. They're so important now in today's world that we are living. The social awareness, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, etc. And with doing that, comes the 21st century competencies like generative thinking, inventive thinking, inferential thinking, adaptive thinking, critical thinking, civics literacy, global literacy, also communication, collaboration skills. So it's not easy because right now in our learning environment, it's not about equipping content knowledge. It's about the values, it's about the competencies that we want our learners to thrive. And because we are doing that, so we need to rethink about our learning environment. How are we designing the support pedagogy that will develop our students holistically? How do we design the learning environment to support inquiry-based approach to learning, where students can come together to debate, to discuss, and to problem solve together? And with that, it is important that we need to transit to a more collaborative and personalized learning environment, in addition to the very didactic environment that we are all being exposed to. So in Singapore, we value, like what Prof. Tan has mentioned, the learning environment to support learning. And because of that, we have a top-down support. So in 2024, we have this school-wide area grant, which means schools will have a sum of money where they can really look into some of the spaces in school they can redesign to meet the needs of their students, as well as to reflect their school culture and identity. Now, you see there's a top-down support, but it's a bottom-up initiative. The school leaders, the teachers, they are involved in this whole design process to meet the learning needs of their students. So with that, right, then in schools we have got the maker space, we have got the thinking space, we have got edible gardens, etc. So you can see that very diverse environment for the learning of our students happening in Singapore schools. So then, how do we design the learning space? Are there guidelines or theories that we can hinge on? And I'm going to go into that now. So I just want to emphasize again and again that right now, currently, in addition to more didactic type of learning, it's important to have student-centered, inquiry-based type of pedagogy. So you need to support multi-perspective dialogue and conversation. You need to support authentic application of knowledge. You need to support self-discovery of learning. You need to support investigation and also looking into solutions that is viable from different perspectives. And they have to come together to talk about all this learning experience as they internalize their learning. So, is our current space, classroom, or our classroom space allowing us to do that? That is a question that we need to ask ourselves. So, and because of that, right, let's go into some of the concepts and guidelines we can hinge on. So the first concept that I would like to share, and with that, and we'll have two guidelines, would be it's important to have learning facilities for our students. So common special rooms like multi-purpose rooms, you know, maker's lab, scientific lab, you know, you have also inquiry-based learning labs. So it's important, depending on the direction of your schools, the aims of learning aims for your students, it's important to have such rooms and facility that will develop students' competencies, skill sets in this area. So with that, rooms, and different schools will have different special rooms because they may want the learners to have different learning outcomes and may differ slightly. So it's important to empower the schools to decide what are the special rooms and facilities that they want for the learners that they want to develop. So facilities is important. But it's also important to have resources. So what are resources? Resources can be books. It can be, of course, your internet Wi-Fi access. But it can also be the 3D printers, the AR, VR sets, etc. That is more in line with the modern technology. So it's important to think about first, what are the rooms that you want that will support your students' learning in that area, then the resources that will come in to support your learners. And that warrants, again, a thinking process for it. So these are some examples. It's a bit blur, but you know, because of the students' phases, I did a study on it. So you see that in this school, they have a lot of spaces for students to make their thinking visible, right? And it's important because that will support their multiple perspective when we look at the problem. Right, in this school is a computer room, but also it has got a lot of space for collaborative learning and with the personal devices, okay? And in National Institute of Education, we have a library space, and this is for individual learning. Next would be the furniture. So important. I always like to think about the design of furniture. Because furniture and the layout of your room will again impact on the engagement and learning behavior of your students. Right, so people always say that circular chair tables, as well as tables with round corners facilitate group discussion. So yesterday, I'm very privileged to visit Inchinoya Primary School. I hope I pronounced correctly. And you can see wonderful furniture that they can actually be configuring to support students' collaborative learning. But it's also important that we have provision where we have space for students to have activities for their learning. And again, I was very privileged yesterday to go to, I hope I pronounced the school name correctly, Minaminaraya Junior High. Right? Yes, correct. Minaminaraya Yama Junior High. Forgive me if I pronounce it wrongly. And what they did was very creative. They actually broadened the corridor so that students can have that common space for group activity. And the group activity is for group discussion, and they have tall furnitures to facilitate that. But not only that, they have whiteboards for students to make their thinking visible. They have walls to act as projection screen. They use the environment to develop communication and collaborative skills of their learners, which is wonderful. Okay, so I think this is important, how the layout, how the furniture comes in to bring forth the type of learning experience and processes that you want. So I'm going to show you a bit of some of the examples. So this is examples of some of the layout. So as you can see, this one will be more lecture style, didactic. This will be a very small collaborative area that's a bit more formal. This one, because of the furniture setting, it's a more informal chat and discussion, whereas this one is more for personalized learning, internalization, quiet moments for yourself. So you can see different configuration would allow for different type of learning intent for our learners. And finally, flexible furniture. So furniture on wheels, like, we see the tables here, we can move around. We have chairs, that's on wheels. So flexibility in the furnitures will allow configurations of different types of arrangement for different types of learning. So you can easily configure it in a multi-purpose room, like here. Okay, so this one would be more for big group, sort of collaborative learning, whereas this is more small group, and you can configure it just because you have very flexible furniture for you to do it. You are not confined by permanent furnitures that might not work at all times. I think this is important. It's also important that we all think that the furniture should be arranged by teachers, but with flexible furniture, we allow students to assume ownership of their learning, and they have the autonomy to arrange the furniture that facilitate their own learning processes too. So it's not about flexible from the perspective of the educator, but also flexibility from the perspective of the learner, allowing them the ownership to also design their own learning environment. I think that's important. And I always feel that, in teaching and learning, it's always very important to make thinking visible. I'm making my thinking visible to all of you by sharing my thoughts. But are we allowing our students to make their thinking visible to us, for us to build on them, for us to reinforce, for us to then help them learn better? So visibility of thinking is so important. So we should have provision like whiteboards, smart boards, etc., for students to articulate their thinking, to let us have a look at it, and for us to then build and to further their learning. And with this, then we can give dynamic feedback for their learning and feed forward to it. So I'm going to show you some more examples, but they are all in the notes, so I'm not going to spend time on it. These are some of the flexible furniture. But I would like to come to the last concepts and a couple of more guidelines that I would like to share with you. And that is, when we talk about student engagement, we always think that is the behavioral engagement, the cognitive engagement. They are important. But how about the effect engagement, the emotion, the moods, the positive learning culture, the safe environment. All these are important. And if it's important, then the furniture, the structure, the colors will play a part. So, can we have furnitures that have a softer feel? Can we have cushions? Can we have bean bags, to help to have a more relaxed environment for learning rather than more structured ones? So again, I saw in the primary school, the elementary school, Inoya. Okay, so I went to the primary school and I saw they have in the library a raised platform, circular shape, it's carpeted, and students can take a book, lie and read a book, and enjoy a book, and cultivate their passion and love for reading. This is important. I see another corner where you have steps. The parents, the teachers can be having a reading session with the students, and the natural lighting coming in without ventilation. All these are important consideration points when we design the space for our students. And finally, colors. This might be cultural and needs to be contextual too. I'm going to show you some examples of Singapore schools, and you'll be seeing that we use a lot of colors, vibrant colors, because we want colors to depict the vibrancy of learning. But, of course, colors that are calm and neutral add to a calm and relaxed mode for learning too. So it's really depending on the nature of the facility and the rooms that you want to evoke what type of learning from the students. So whether it's colorful, whether it's more neutral, it depends on the type of atmosphere that you want to create for your learners. And finally, one more last guideline that I would like to share is it's always very important to have artifacts on the wall. Artifacts that act as stimulus and to learning, trigger to learning. Artifacts that make their thinking visible, and it will feed forward to even more innovative learning processes. So are we putting artifacts that will help them trigger their thoughts, their perspective and learning at the right places, and at the common places, at the facility rooms, at the classroom, etc. So those are things that we might want to ask ourselves too. So I've just shared with you briefly some of the concepts and guidelines that we can hinge on when we design learning spaces for our learners. As we mentioned, right, in Singapore, this autonomy is also distributed to school leaders and teachers. And it's important that they are scaffolded in this design process, where they are the architect of the learning environment. I would like to actually offer another perspective when it comes to learning environment design too. I'm an educational psychologist by training. And for me, helping students to have intrinsic motivation testing. Okay, thank you. So helping students' intrinsic motivation, to foster intrinsic motivation to learn is very important, because it is through the learning space that you design that you ignite that passion and the curiosity to want to learn. And with that, right, I'm going to share with you a motivational theory that will help us in using it as a frame. In using it as a frame to guide us in the design process. So, if we look into self-determination theory, a motivational theory, it says that for the students to feel motivated for their learning, they need to satisfy 3 basic psychological needs. The needs for confidence. So you need to help to develop their confidence and also their competence. Second, autonomy. Students need to own their learning process. That's the reason for self-centered pedagogical approaches. And it's important to build relationship. The need for relatedness is very important. So, as we mentioned, right, collaborative learning is very vital in today's days and age. But why? It's because it's also fostering meaningful relationship among people as we learn and work together. And that is a basic psychological need. So, we need to look into design your learning environment that will satisfy these 3 basic psychological needs so that students will be very motivated and interested in their learning. And I'll give you examples on it. So, before I give you an example, I just wanted to bring in that technology is coming in. There's need to see how technology can be harnessed to provide affordances to scaffold students' learning. So, right now, currently, in a face-to-face lecture like this, we also need to make provision for online participation. Same thing in the classroom in future, or even now, as we have face-to-face engagement, we also need to have equipment to have hybrid session, to have online, so that students can now learn in a borderless environment, no longer constrained by the physical classroom. I don't have time to talk about that, but this is something that we need to be looking into, as we move forward in this digitized age. So let me give you some examples of school right now. Greenwood Primary School. So you can see this is a special room. It's a it's a media resource library for the students. All right, colorful, vibrant type of learning culture that they want there. So you have a screen that gives information from time to time, and it can be interactive for the learners. You can see that this is another space, that is in the school itself, and it's really for the students to explore, a team, and they have the resources provided for the students as they explore the team in their learning. You can see that they have imagining lab. This is a thinking lab. They want ideation to happen, co-construction of ideas and knowledge to happen in this. You see that it's very collaborative. Again, it's quite colorful. And also another inquiry lab. So you can see that in this school, right, inquiry-based learning is very, very important. Ideation, problem solving is very important for their learners. Boon-Lay Garden Primary School, colorful again. Flexible furnitures, on wheels for them to move around. Resources, cabinets to store all the value resources for their learners. This is a primary school. And then science labs too, that's very important for our investigation and exploration learning of the students. And these are the art room. You can see again, a lot of artifacts. And why artifacts? Artifacts is also to build students' confidence, to trigger their learning, to showcase their achievement. All these are important. And it's, again, satisfying the basic needs of competence that we are talking about. So you can see that students' work are all up on the wall. Queenstown Secondary School. Common space for building relationship, collaborative learning, collaborative discussion. Satisfying the basic needs of relatedness, meaningful relationship. Showcase work and achievement, satisfying the needs for competence and helping to develop confidence in our students. You see all the spaces again, and it is to actually facilitate different types of learning, be it individualized or collaborative. You Okay, these are some of the other examples. I just want to also look that in this school, we also have a common space for students to book, where you can see students leading a discussion. They have smart boards to help them, the resources that they have, and they are leading the discussion among a group of students. So it's important that all these are available for the students so that they can have a lot of discussion that have different perspective, and it will enrich their learning. Finally, I think this is the last one before I show you some of our design spaces for NIE. This is Boon Lay Secondary School, and you see that now it's not about indoor, it's outdoor, okay? And students have got performance stage and seating for outdoor performances. Again, it's about celebrating their achievement, satisfying their needs of competence and confidence. Right, and as students come together to work in this media lab podcast, they are working together, meaningful relationship, but yet working together on a learning journey, working towards a product. I think that's also very important. Okay, so let me conclude my presentation. I think I begin by mentioning that I will share about how we can be looking into design consideration for the teaching and learning in today's context. We talk about having a more macro perspective. That means we have the top-down support, and with our ministry giving grants to enable bottom-up initiative. With school leaders and teachers being able to be part of the design process. And with teachers and school leaders being part of the design process, there's need to help them think about how they can go about doing that. That's why the guidelines, the theories will help them to think about how they can also design spaces to take part in that process that will ultimately develop the learners they want and to reinforce the type of learning processes they want. So I've shared that in my presentation. And you must be thinking, so this is for primary and secondary school, then how about higher institution? Colorful, again, colors, you know. And this is NIE. This is for students that are at a higher level, right? We are developing pre-service as well as in-service teachers. And we have a lot of collaborative spaces. We have also walls for them to make their thinking visible, to showcase their artifacts. We have different types of furniture, you know, to have a more informal setting for their group discussion. We have walls with different work time because students do international practicum, you know, so they are at different parts of the world when they do practicum, and we just want to signify this journey of theirs. And again, we have got boards for them to showcase their achievement and their learning process. Again, this is another configuration, colorful, again, because we want the vibrant learning culture. This is a typical tutorial rooms in NIE, very collaborative in nature, and then we have the screens that will help, the smart spot that will help the tutor to facilitate students' thinking process. Last but not least, in NIE, we are transitioning and converting all our tutorial rooms to have technological affordances. So this is a prototype, and we are going to transform all of the tutorial rooms by I think early next year, okay? All of the tutorial rooms will be fitted with data sensors that will be able to capture communication, discussion, interaction, movement of the teachers as well as the students. Why we are doing that? We are doing that to have evidence-based teaching. We want to use data analytics to inform us of our pedagogical approaches, our teaching and students' learning processes. So in NIE, we are investing on that. We are transforming all the tutorial rooms to have all these technological affordances. But in the meantime, we are not neglecting the fact that it needs to be collaborative in nature. So you can see that the layout is all in groups, collaboratively. And we have screened at the sites for hybrid learning. So in addition to face-to-face collaborative learning, the screen at the individual sites will allow students to also collaborate with people that is offline too. So it will be very hybrid too. So all these are the technological affordances that we can hinge on to help our learners and to help them in their learning processes as we develop future-ready learners. And with that, I thank you.